once again. So, what's the situation in the Ukraine conflict? And it's over 5 weeks since Russia's invasion. Remember, they thought they'd take the capital in 3 days, and in fact, they're being driven back. So, their force is about 20 kilometers north of the center of Kiev. They're about 10 kilometers from the center of Kiev a week ago. So Russia's even announced that it's ending major combat operations in northern Ukraine. It's going to concentrate on the Donbass. Now, why would they do that? I mean, I would start disbelieving every word coming out of the Kremlin. Only believe it if you can prove it to be true. It would seem to be moronic to give the game away, but this is perhaps a public relations thing. They don't want to be defeated on the home front. Now, I know people say that there is no public opinion in Russia because you're absolutely not entitled to an opinion. But nevertheless, Putin doesn't want to be hated. He doesn't want people to be demoralized. They talk about him being an echo chamber. And it is true that he's in a bubble of like-minded people, of sycophants who feed his delusions and to some extent share them. But I think even he's not completely impervious to the truth, and reality's getting through. I mean, the mid-range estimate of the Russian deaths in Ukraine, about 15,000 combat deaths, and multiply that by 2 at least for the wounded. Somewhat depends what you count as wounded. For example, in the British Army, they count 1 drop of blood. That's a wound. Even if you don't need any medical treatment you carry on, nevertheless, that's recorded as wounded. In some armies, the German army, up to the Second World War, for example, unless it needed medical treatment, they just didn't record that. Anyway, so, and obviously on top of the dead and wounded, some people are captured, deserted, missing. So it's quite easily 50,000 casualties of some sort of the 200,000 who originally invaded. And some of those units are being withdrawn. It's thought they're going to be replaced with fresh units as well. But really hammering on Mariupol. I'm surprised that's been held. I mean, I don't know of anyone who thinks that Mariupol can hold out, and certainly not for much longer. So they say that they're trying to get humanitarian aid in there. Russia's blocking that. The Russians have deliberately attacked humanitarian aid convoys again and again, not just in Ukraine, in Syria. This is obviously part of their modus operandi. There have been constant, negotiations for humanitarian corridors to allow civilians to escape. They've been shelled again and again, or the Russians have ushered them onto roads that they've mined, things like that. So every low-down, dirty trick has been used. And of course, I'm not naive enough to think that no Ukrainian has ever done wrong. There might be war crimes on the Ukrainian side. I don't know of any. Obviously, I wouldn't credit a word that's said on Russian state TV, where they give these lachrymose accounts of the most barbarous atrocities visited upon defenseless Russians, or claiming that a Ukrainian doctor plans to castrate any Russians who surrender, but without identifying the doctor or what the source of that information is. Is it a quotation? Is it a publication? Is it a sound recording, or what? They just made it up. So I wouldn't lend the least bit of credence to such atrocity propaganda coming from the Kremlin, obvious projection accusing their victims of the atrocities that the Russian military is itself perpetrating. And the curious thing is the multi-dimensionality of people, because some of those who commit these war crimes, they can actually be amiable people in other circumstances, and that's what's very hard to take. They could be personable, they could be loving family members and firm friends and all the rest of it. So Putin's attack is clearly stalled in the north, not going terribly well in the south, but the idea is to have a land bridge to connect southern Russia through to the Donbass all the way on to Crimea. The fake Trump-Russiagate stuff, well, no. I mean, I know obviously that Russia hacked the US election 2016 in an effort to get Donald Trump elected. It cost them only a few $1 million. There was almost no pushback. And this, what puzzles me, is why successive US administrations haven't hit back far harder with cyber warfare, with pausing the Russian government. Anyway, and Russia's taken significant casualties, including some of their elite units. I think it's the 331st Guards Parachute Regiment, the word guard being honorific there, not that they actually guard anything. So Putin the other day was saying that unfriendly countries are going to have to pay for Russian oil and gas exports in rubles, which would compel them to purchase Russian rubles, thereby driving up the value of Russia's currency. And indeed, the rubles recovered significantly in the last 5 weeks. Of course, it took a terrible tumble the end of February into early March, but the Russian central bank made strenuous efforts to push it up, and they've been actually quite successful on that. So it's recovered almost all the lost ground, but they say that's artificially inflated its value, and that actually is unsustainable. It can't last. But anyway, so far the European Union has stood firm, to my surprise, and they're not caving in, saying, no, these contracts say we're paying in euros. We're paying in euros. You can't unilaterally rewrite the contract, just like Putin constantly shredding agreements and demanding good faith from others. I mean, hilariously, it's about 15 years ago, it's in the era of George W. Bush, that Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, said that the cardinal principle of Russian foreign policy was respect for international law. Now that is risible, given that they grossly breach international law every single day, and this invasion would be a case in point. So obviously logistics have really hampered the Russians. Have been hamstrung by Ukrainian attacks on their supply lines, and the Ukrainians have even launched a counteroffensive, some of their helicopters blowing up some oil facility in western Russia, not far from Kharkiv. So I thought the Ukrainians could do much more like that, blowing up bridges, tunnels, roads, railway lines, and therefore forcing the Russians to guard these facilities, tying down huge numbers of troops. So obviously there's been a serious misjudgment. They're going to concentrate more on Donbass, the Russians, because the logistic problems will not be so serious there. And that's where they've consolidated, and they've already moved forward quite a bit there, and then link on to Mariupol. If they capture that, the port, the facilities aren't destroyed, then they can fan out from there. That'll really ease the logistics bottleneck, and it'll free up a lot of Russian forces that are currently fighting there. So something like 150,000 civilians in Mariupol. One thing is the Russian tactic is just really knock down every single building there is. Which ones are the enemy combatants in, which are the civilians? We don't know, we don't care. If we blow up every building, we're going to get some of the combatants at least. It's demoralizing for the enemy. They always say one of the effects of it is psychological bombardment. It's nerve shredding for those on the receiving end, and by firing around the clock, you ensure they can't sleep, and people just can't take that. They collapse, they're shell shocked and so on. It's just not just the physical effect. They just be exhausted by weeks of that. Just going back mad and just really breaking their will to fight. That's what it is about. Not necessarily killing or even injuring the enemy. If you break their will to fight, that'll be sufficient. Ukraine, I don't see it being able to retake Crimea. I think it's too heavily guarded. In the east, they could have made a little bit of progress. It doesn't happen. They're not really doing it. I hope they're using this respite, the Ukrainians. But one thing is, the Ukrainians think we mustn't put too many of our best units in the east, because they could easily cut off by an invasion from the north surrounding them. But as you see, the Russian army certainly doesn't move like lightning. Now, obviously, the Ukrainians have been prioritizing killing the generals, snipers. The Russians have been forced to communicate by open means, open telephone and so on, and radio. The Ukrainians will be able to intercept it, know where the general is, have the sniper lying in wait to take him out. Now, whilst you're waiting for that general to show up, you'll miss many golden opportunities to kill lots of other people. And is that a mistake? Because that general might never show up. Even if he shows up, might not quite be in range, might not get a clear shot. You might miss. Even if you hit him, he might survive. But here's why it's worth it. Partly it's demoralizing, especially to the top brass, incentivize them to end the war, knowing that they really are being personally targeted. And that's scary, knowing your name is on their hit list. There's a bullet out there in your name with it. And the other thing is, it stymies the Russians because, well, they're paralyzed for a minute. Is the general dead or not? They have to verify that. He might be wounded. How bad is that wound? He might survive. And then what happens? Presumably they've got a protocol where someone immediately moves up the chain of command. I don't know. Or does it go all the way back to Putin? But the Russian army, the first thing that's really dinned into them is a robotic level of obedience. They can't advance, retreat, open fire, cease fire, anything without orders, which is why they're so painfully slow, and the whole campaign's been moving at a snail's pace for them. And so obviously if you take out some of the generals, that really slows it down till they confirm, yes, he is dead, yes, this new guy's in command, has got to be informed, and then start giving orders. But they think that some Russians are deliberately sabotaging it, setting their fuel, pouring away their fuel so they don't have to go forward. Oh, damn, finding any excuse to stay out of harm's way. For some of them, the objective here is to be survival, certainly not victory, if they're tacitly accepting this war is already lost. So people are willing to suffer when they believe that victory is attainable. When they believe that the war is unwinnable, it just becomes minimizing their risk and loss reduction. So, it's, what was I going to say? Damage limitation. So now Putin backed down on that demand that European Union countries are going to have to pay in Russian rubles, but he might not do so again. A month from now, he might be in such dire straits, says, well, I'm going to do it. Well, that'll affect Russia too. If it can't sell oil and gas to European Union countries, that'll cost to his economy to the tune of $400 million a day, and that's very significant in an economy there. That their whole economy is worth something like $2 trillion a year. So, I mean, just want to think, how much is 400 million times 12? Quite a lot. It's about $4.8 billion. Obviously, not all of that is to the government, and their economy is contracted severely already. But he might say, well, I'm going to do it because they will crack before I will. Because in Russia, okay, we're suffering, but as I say, the public are not allowed to express their views. Peaceful protest is criminalized. The media is severely censored. But even then, public discontent could spill over into massive demonstrations. But that would take a few months of severe hardship. So he reckons the EU would blink before he would, and would cave in and say, okay, we just can't take it. We're going into summer, we don't need energy so much, but obviously we already need energy. And actually the price is going up, people are going to cut back on energy usage to the bare essentials. Summer's not that difficult, but winter really will be difficult. But we've got about 6 months to figure out how European Union countries are going to get enough oil and gas. Already asking the Saudis, the Qataris, others to pump more oil and gas. Could sanctions be lifted on Iran? And then just using wind farms like mad. Maybe all planning restrictions could just go. We can build wind farms everywhere, wind turbines all over the place. Now, I know there might be an eyesore, but what's the alternative? Is funding these hideous scenes in Ukraine. These really are eyesores, and obviously pollution, climate change. So I think we should get to a stage where we've got so much energy that we can afford to be fussy. We've got so much renewable energy, we're going to close down a few of the wind farms, but we're many years off that right now. Anyway, so yeah, air superiority, Russia's never attained it. I don't think Ukraine has it either, but it's contested. And no, they haven't destroyed the Ukrainian Air Force on the ground. And no, they haven't shot it all out of the sky. And Ukrainian air defense is semi-effective, but they do need more SAMs. So concentrate on the east. The Russians may well be regrouping, might finally sort out some of the logistic problems and attack again at the north. Especially the ground is going to be dry quite soon, so they can go off road without being stuck in the mud. Their campaign was literally mired in the early days, and that's why it was so badly timed. I mean, what was the thought process? That it would be a cakewalk, that yes, deep down they really want to be conquered by Russia. He was dead wrong about that one. No, they don't want to be subjugated, as they proved again and again. So yeah, it was recognized Donbass and Luhansk, no doubt trying to integrate them into the Russian Federation officially quite soon. So that's what his next move are going to be, the oil and gas weapon. And plus, he's got a closing window of opportunity. In 10 years, the European Union will have gone much further with renewable energy. So will the United Kingdom, Canada, maybe to some extent even the United States. So he won't really have that oil and gas weapon. Oil and gas prices might go down significantly if other countries, China, even India, have moved away from oil, gas and coal. And then what does Russia do? It can't switch off the heating for people in winter, and how's it going to make money? In a way that make it even more dangerous, because its only export will be weapons. Would they even export nukes? Because that's what they've got. Notably, he's not saber-rattled on nuclear weapons recently, or indeed the weapons of mass destruction. Maybe behind the scenes he was sufficiently warned off. If you do that, they'll be held to pay. Maybe the $300 billion of Russia's national savings, which are invested in NATO countries, would just be confiscated. They're frozen, but they could just be confiscated. And how dough he was to leave himself a hostage to fortune, to leave so much money in these countries he calls unfriendly, thinking they wouldn't do anything. So the reaction has been more united, more effectual than he, of course, anticipated. He forecast that Western countries simply roll over and accept it, as they had about Luhansk and Donbass, maybe tacitly, sanctions not that severe over Crimea. He thought if he grabs most of Ukraine now, there'd be a fait accompli. Oh, well, it's done. It's irreversible. Nothing we can do. We simply have to accept it. But there's been no finality. Ukraine is fighting on, and there's little sign they're going to flag. I mean, Zelensky said we're desperate. We need more help. I mean, he's sort of got to say that to keep the shipments of weapons coming, and I hope they get really everything they need. A negotiated settlement, that's how it's going to end. And I've listed the things that Putin would want. Recognition of Luhansk, Donbass and Crimea as Russian, or at least so-called independent. He would like the Russian language of co-official status in Ukraine. He would like Ukraine to never join NATO, to never join the European Union. That's 6. Is there anything else? I mean, cession of any more land? I'm not sure. Would like Zelensky to go, I suppose that's 7. Is that 7 points I made? Which ones? I mean, Zelensky's talked about never joining NATO anyway. If they could be armed to the teeth, maybe they could defend themselves. I'm not sure. He might, but what's Russia going to give? Nothing. All right, that's enough from me. Thank you so much for following me. So please donate to me on PayPal, George Callahan at 79@gmail.com. That's GeorgeCallahan 79@gmail.com. All small letters. Toodle pip.